My favorite portion of the program, when they're all done and now I get to hang out with you. It's one of the few great joys of playing chairman for a while. Okay, I have dozens of questions, but I first want to go through a concept, and I'm going to ask all of you. If I came to you tomorrow and said, look, we have some research papers that say the current design of H-1s does have some wage suppression because it's employer-sponsored, and therefore this visa is functionally sponsored and owned by the employer. How do I have some of this population come in and that talent be much more portable in the economy? At least our side, our joint economic economists on the Republican side, we've been playing with models looking at, does that portability minimize, actually remove the wage suppression? And then I would do, as a couple of you spoken about, then actually move to a talent, scoring system. So do I get rid of H-1s, say I want more Canada, Australia, New Zealand, Great Britain, others who've gone sort of a point type system, and say I want to maximize, this is on the skills-based visas. Here's our shortages in the economy. We can tell the shortage by the movement of wages. Is that a more rational model? If those of us who are absolutely terrified and fixated on the scale of our growing debt, as of today, we're borrowing $87,500 a second. You do realize if I do the 12-month calendar, we borrowed $2.7 trillion in the last 12 months. It's demographics and interest. Dr. Pardue, let's start at one end and go to the other. Tell me why a true point-based talent model is not a better substitution than employer-sponsored model.
Well, why it is not, or why
I'm not. I'm giving you an open-ended.
Yeah. I mean, so there's sort of two things, which is one, the devil is a little bit in the details with the point system, which is how you actually develop it. I think over-indexing on any aspect has its drawbacks. Over-indexing on education, for instance, can produce degree mills in other countries that can then reduce the signal of those points. So I think the devil is in the details with the points-based system.
But don't we already have some of that already happening in the H-1 qualifications? You saw the scandals last year of some of the. It was actually in Bangalore that we had fake resumes, fake degrees.
Yeah, exactly. So I think that's a lesson to learn in the design of any formal point system. But I would also say why it is that the value of H-1B visas is that they facilitate productive matches between employers and employees that would not otherwise occur. And when you allow portability, you raise the productivity of those employer-employee matches. And increased productivity will lead to increased revenues, which will lead to higher tax payments that reduce the deficit. And so that's sort of the main basis of
and that's what the academic articles say of the portability.
Yeah, exactly.
Mr. Dublin?
Well, obviously, portability is good, and we can actually just work even within the current H-1B system to make it more portable, right? It's already technically portable. Actually, thousands of H-1B workers change jobs every year, but it is a lower rate than the general workforce, and in part is because of the permanent residency process. So I think if you actually fixed the permanent residency process, the H-1B system would almost fix itself. Think about it. Why would a company that wants a permanent worker sponsor a temporary visa? Because the permanent visa takes years to obtain. So they take the temporary visa in the meantime.
So your argument, it's the distortion within temporary to permanent, and
yes.
Because this is so hard, that's why you
That's exactly why we have so much demand for H-1Bs. And that is also the lottery design within the demand is what allows the outsourcing companies that bring in low productivity workers.
Would you get rid of the lottery mechanism?
I would just do a wage ranking, adjusted by age, like Mr. Neufeld talked about, because you want younger people. Because if these people are going to stay here, forever in America, you'd rather have a 30-year-old making $150K than a 50-year-old, because they have 20 extra years to contribute paying taxes and 20 later years to receive Social Security.
We're going to come back and talk more about that. Dr. Holtz-Eakin.
So point number one is that these are lifetime decisions that people are making, and policy certainty is very important. And no policy is absolutely certain, but legislation is way better than executive action. And so I'm pleased that you're considering legislation on this front to give people some notion of how the program will work. Then the issue becomes, how big can you make the box legislatively. And if you just have to work within the confines of the current H-1B, portability is a good thing to do. Allowing the spouses to work would be a good thing to do. It's sort of mating means we get a lot of skilled workers. Then the question is, do you want to push the box wider and have more skill-based immigration that you can use and deploy in the economy?
Look, you spoke to this, Doctor, a couple of months ago. Look, we have needs for agriculture. We have needs for other types of specialty. What we do is, and the President Trump has actually said this, it's insane we educate populations and then send them home to compete with us.
Agreed.
But at least for part of this discussion, we're almost fixated on the talent-based side, because I've been in many ways hunting for where we actually have at least a commonality of vision. So maybe something that's executable in today's.
Like our DACA kids, for example.
Yeah, but so falling into those.
I guess what I'm trying to say is, I think legislating on this is a really good idea. How aggressive that legislation can be dictates just how broad you're going to make this. If you just want to fix the H-1B program, that's what's feasible, do it. I think that's a start. But I think there's room for more economically based immigration in the U.S. with some sort of talent score in there to rank people.
Mr. Neufeld.
I agree with what everyone else has said, and I just wanted to give you two additional points for your consideration. The first is one thing that experiences with points-based systems in Canada and the UK have learned. They both started their point systems without having a role of employer sponsorship, and they realized that the immigrants that they were coming without having job matches they had a higher unemployment, their integration into the economy was slower, and so they both added into their point system a role for points if you already had a job offer, and that improved the outcomes.
Okay, let me ask again. So point system, but you got a bonus if you actually had an employment commitment.
That's what they've learned, yes. And it seems like once they included that bonus, that resolved much of their problems. And so I think having a role for employer sponsorship still should be a part of the answer, even if you still want to have a better selection mechanism in evaluating the different employers who are trying to get visas. And the second point for consideration is, I think one thing some of my panelists have talked about is that if you're thinking about the fiscal effects, there's both the direct impact of having additional workers, and there's a productivity effect. And I'm skeptical that focusing on the shortages is going to be the best proxy for maximizing the benefits of the productivity effect in the long term. What might be a shortage now might not be a shortage in the future. A shortage might not be the kind of thing that's going to lead to solving a shortage might not be the kind of thing that's going to lead to innovation.
So when you do your mental exercise in regards to productivity effect, are you actually also looking at changes within generalized wages and wage growth as part of that productivity effect?
I think in the long run though the wage growth is most wage growth is going to be driven in the long run by the productivity effect.
But as we often see, sometimes when we get a roll in or flattening of productivity, sometimes the new wage benchmarking, though, remains. So it's the lag effect. It's a little geeky, but Dr. Holtz-Eakin.
I want to emphasize the importance of the productivity and long-run growth for the following reason. What's been left out, it falls to me always to be the skunk at the garden party, but this is all fiscal good news for the federal government. But a big influx of people is a fiscal challenge for states and localities. Lots of immigrants mean more police, more fire, housing, schools. And so the initial impacts are very hard sometimes in the localities. That's a bad news story, and that's one of the reasons it's hard to talk about this in some circumstances. Can I just finish?
Finish, and then
over time, the bigger are the economic impacts. That is everything for states and localities. Their base is a rapidly growing economy. That's what they benefit from.
Look, you have the PhD, I do not. But I would argue if our current demographic trends, look, I'm in what would have been considered a high growth state, yet I'm now hovering, Arizona's hovering, 2%? We're closing schools. So what happened when some of the way we used to look at growth was growth on top of growth? Now I have a society that basically is at zero population growth. Maybe we actually do have more capacity than we've thought about in past years, than we would have had in past years where we had generalized growth.
The thing I'm concerned about,
Would have had in past years where we had generalized growth.
the thing I'm concerned about, you're probably right. You're the one who's going to be governor, not me. The other things being the same. Like we've adjusted to the fact that we don't have as many kids, so we've closed some schools. We have the property tax base, and we've adjusted the rates to be in line to finance that. And now a whole bunch of people show up, and I'm paying property taxes to expand that school that we just closed. And then we have to rehire some firefighters and police. That's part of the assimilation challenge, and that's part of the fiscal challenge that doesn't show up on the federal books and is often not thought about in doing the federal reforms.
I need to think about that a little bit more because I've been looking also at my demographic seesaw. If I'm moving much older, I now need adult daycare, but I may not need juvenile daycare. And do I actually start to balance my seesaw? So look, you and I could whiteboard this and have some fun with it.
Yes, but this is why high-skilled immigration is such a boon, because it's not just about the federal level being positive. At the state level, college-educated immigrants are a fiscal positive because, it's true they consume public services at the state level more than at the federal level, but, they also pay higher income taxes. They also pay much more in sales tax. They pay more in property tax. And so high-skilled immigration does pay for itself. It's low-skilled immigration that is really a challenge at the state and federal level too, really.
Okay, you've built a model, and I hope others will actually play for this both on the left and the right. So you've built a model, and I can put in my age, my talent, populations, and get calculations, right?
Well, so far what it has is about 50 different policies that are very widely discussed. Everything from deportations, legalization, this visa, this other visa, shifting this green card, creating this new visa, and then you can see the impact of that.
So
but if you want the by age and education level, it's on my written testimony, and I also have a sheet here that I can give you.
I'm sort of cheating here because I looked at your sheet, but this is more for the communal discussion.
Yes.
So let's say I'm sitting in front of your models. Give me what maximizes benefit to U.S. budget, and then what adjustments do I make to maximize wage growth? I mean, where is my sweet spot for, hey, here's what we do for the fact we're borrowing $7.5 billion today. But over here, I also need wage growth. Right. And often the discussion, the fear of immigration, particularly talent-based immigration, is wage suppression. Right. But we know if it's talent-based, if properly done, actually does just the opposite. It actually raises productivity and general wage growth. Where's my sweet spot according to your models?
Yes, so when economists think about the impact of immigration on wages, it's not that immigrants lower or raise wages, it's that we have relative wages, right? Physicians don't compete with construction workers. If we suddenly dropped 1 million construction workers in the United States, that's not going to affect negatively the wages of physicians, right? If anything, it's going to be positive. They're going to have more patients. And that's exactly what happens with high-skilled. Imagine we bring in suddenly a large number of high-skilled immigrants to America. That's actually going to raise demand for low-skilled labor in this country. It's going to raise the wages of hairdressers, of construction workers, of where we tend to think low-paid occupation. But they will compete with physicians in America. That's absolutely true. However, when we think of high-skilled immigrants, you're right, there are productivity effects. Maybe they create a new product. It's not just about physicians. It's AI, it's entrepreneurs, it's startups. America is one of the few countries without a startup visa, where you can't come and create a business without you investing your own money, right? We have the treaty trader and treaty investor visa, the E2, not with every country, it should be expanded. But for the countries that we do, it has to be your own money. You can't just be a startup founder that goes to Silicon Valley and gets VC funding, which is actually the most productive, right? So the sweet spot is you want to bring in people who are entrepreneurs, either they are startup founders, you want to bring in people who are college educated, ideally graduate, and people who are under 50 years old. That's really it.
Okay, for our panel here, anything that's burning in your souls that you've wanted to share that we haven't been able to ask? In that case, I'm going to bring this to a close. Please be prepared. For the next week or so, we may send you written questions and ask you to send it back to us, which will be made part of the public record. And with that, thank you for everyone participating. I care a lot about this subject. We have spent years and years and years in my office and also with our joint economic team trying to build what we call the unified theory of trying to stabilize U.S. debt and economic growth and opportunity. And as we build that unified theory, the fact of the matter is immigration, particularly talent, I can't make any of the other numbers work without fixing this module of it. It's just, it turns out it's the cornerstone of making all the other adoptions of technology, new processes, deregulation work. We need to start to think about this as a unified theory of economics. And with that, the hearing's closed. Thank you for your participation.